In this video, we talk about how to perform a harmonic analysis using Joseph Boulogna's Quartet Number 3, Movement 1, measures 9 to 16 from his 6 concertante quartets. The first thing you want to do when you're doing a harmonic analysis is, of course, to listen to the piece. Now, in this case, we don't have a professional recording, so we're going to have to make do with a MIDI recording. And when you listen, what you want to be listening for is phrase endings. Okay, so here we go with our MIDI recording. Okay, now in this case, our recording coincided with a phrase ending right here. But of course, if you had a professional recording, it probably would have gone on past this phrase ending. And that's actually really helpful sometimes, because one piece of advice I often give to people is that sometimes it's easier to listen for phrase beginnings to identify phrase endings. And that's because after our phrase ending that happens here, another phrase would begin. This beginning might be a new phrase beginning, or it might be a repetition of a previously heard phrase beginning, okay? But regardless, you're going to hear a sense of beginning here, and what that will allow you to do is identify that something has just ended, because when you have a beginning, it means you've just had an ending. And sometimes these beginnings are a little easier to hear than endings. So that's kind of one piece of advice I would give you beyond just listen for goals, phrase goals to mark the ends of phrases. So in this case, we heard our recording coincide with our phrase ending, and hopefully you heard a sense that the phrase was finished as opposed to unfinished. So that tells us we're dealing with an authentic cadence. And then I see that scale degree 1, do, is in the soprano here, and that gives us PAC. Okay, now the next step here is you want to start doing your Roman numeral analysis, and you want to start from the ending. And the reason is because you can use the fact that you've just identified a PAC to help you in identifying Roman numerals. So for example, you know that PACs involve 5 to 1, right? Which means that the baseline is going to be sol moving to do, or scale degree 5 moving to scale degree 1, right? So that tells you you can look for that in the bass. So here we are in C major. Here I see do happening, or scale degree 1, and here I see sol happening, or scale degree 5. So that's probably where my 5 to 1 motion is, and I'm just going to mark that here, 5, 1. Then I want to take a look at the 5 chord, because we've learned about several ways that it can be strengthened. You can add a 7th, you could do cadential 6/4, and I want to know, are any of those things happening, right? So I'm going to start with cadential 6/4, and what I'm going to do is actually spell cadential 6/4. And this is something that I really recommend doing rather than just looking at the score and identifying what notes are there. Instead, spell what you expect to be there and then check to see if that's there. So in this case, cadential 6/4 would be G in the bass, a C, a 4th above the bass, and E, a 6th above the bass. And here I see an E, and here I see a C, so I'm dealing with cadential 6/4 then. Then the next thing I want to know is there a 7th after cadential 6/4 resolves? So does it resolve to 5/7 or 5 triad? So I'm going to spell 5/7, G, B, D, F, and that means I'm looking for an F, okay? And I'm looking right here. I see a B, a D, and a G, so no F. So that means we're just dealing with a triad. So I'm going to write cadential 6/4 resolving to 5/3 then, okay? So there's sort of that next step, analyze the cadence with Roman numerals. Now I want to back up once more, because I know that at a cadence it's very common to have a strong predominant, right? So I want to look to see, is there a strong predominant in that phrase? And I also know that strong predominants typically harmonize fa, or scale degree 4, in the bass. So in this case that would be an F, right? In C major, scale degree 4 or fa is F. So I'm looking for an F in the bass, and indeed I see that here. Okay, now I also know from what I've learned so far that 2/6 is the more common strong predominant, although 4 is also very common. So I'm going to start by spelling 2/6 in the key of C. Actually, I'm going to spell root position 2, D, F, A, and then I know, of course, that 2/6 would have F in the bass. So now I'm looking for D, F, and A above that F. And I see an F here. I see G and F here, and I see E and D here. And the reason I'm circling all of that is because this F lasts for 2 notes. So that means that the chord could appear anywhere in that space, right? Not just above that first F, but anywhere that the F is sort of active, okay? So I see more than D, F, and A. What do I do with the E, and what do I do with the G? Well, the place that you want to go if these notes are not part of the chord is to see if they can be explained as embellishing tones, right? And in this case, what I'm seeing is they're approached by a static note and left by step down. So that's indicative of a suspension. So this E could be a suspension, and so could the G. And that means the D and the F are just coming in a little bit delayed over this 2 chord. So I'm going to write 2-6 here because I found D, F, and A, and the notes of the 2 chord have been displaced by suspensions as the chord comes in. Okay, so that's analyzing the ending. After I've done that, I've got a sense of how the phrase ends. I now want to move toward the beginning and think about the beginning patterns that I know. Okay, I'm going to use kind of the same method that I've been using at the phrase ending here, which is to look at the bass and then take a guess based on the tonic prolongation paradigms that I have learned. Okay, so here at the beginning, I see that there's do in the bass, or scale degree 1, right? And that do lasts for this entire measure. That tells me that likely this whole measure is a single chord. Okay, and then in measure 2, I see that I'm down to T in the bass, or scale degree 7. And again, T lasts for the entire measure, so that tells me there's probably 1 chord happening there. And then I see sol, or scale degree 5, followed by, in the next measure, do, scale degree 1. I'll stop there for now. Okay, so now going back and doing Roman numerals. At the beginning, I see do in the bass, or scale degree 1, and since I'm at the beginning of a phrase, I'm expecting to start on Roman numeral 1. So that would be C, E, G. I want to look for C, E, G above this bass to verify I've got the right chord. So C, of course, in the bass, there's a G, E, G, E. So indeed, I have the right chord, Roman numeral 1. After that, I see T in the bass. I know that at the beginning of a phrase, a common paradigm is to go do, T, do in the bass, right? And if I did that, I'd expect T to be harmonized by an inverted dominant 7, right? So when T is in the bass, or scale degree 7 of an inverted dominant 7, I would be dealing with 5, 6, 5. Of course, could be 5, 6 rather than 5, 6, 5, so you could have a 5 triad in first inversion rather than a 5, 7 chord. But 5, 6, 5 is more common, I would say, than a 5 triad. So now I'm going to spell 5, 7. That would be G, B, D, F, and those are the notes that I'm looking for to verify that this is going to be a 5, 6, 5 chord. Okay, so I see B, I see G. I've got this C sharp that I'll have to maybe figure out, but I see it goes to a D, and there's plenty more D than C sharp, so that means the D is probably more important. I see F up here, D, another F. I see this E here that maybe I'll have to figure out what to do with, but most of the notes in this measure make 5, 6, 5, and I've really only got 2 notes that don't belong to the chord. So 5, 6, 5 then is the right Roman numeral here. What do I do with these circled notes? Well, this C sharp is approached by leap and left by step up, so that's going to be an appoggiatura. And this E is approached by step, left by step in the opposite direction. That's going to be a neighbor tone. So as long as I can explain those notes as embellishing tones, then I'm good to go with my Roman numeral label. Okay, so far we've got 1 going to 5, 6, 5, and then I'm expecting that 5, 6, 5 to go back to 1. Except that here I've got sol, scale degree 5 in the bass, and I would be expecting do. So that means my guess of Roman numeral 1 is incorrect here. So when this happens, you need to use a little bit of contextual information to help you. 5, 6, 5 is a dominant function chord, right? We expect it to go to tonic. If it doesn't do that, then chances are the dominant is still active, it's still being prolonged. And that would make sense given that I have sol, scale degree 5 in the bass, because sol is part of a 5 chord. So maybe instead of moving on to tonic yet, I've just changed inversions, right? I've gone to root position 5, 7 instead of resolving right away to tonic. So I want to double check, do I have G, B, D, F above my bass G here? So I've got a B, I got D, F, D, F, I got a bunch of Bs. Here's a C that doesn't belong to the chord. This one we can explain as a passing tone, approached by step, left by step in the same direction. So indeed, a good analysis here is to say that the 5-7 has switched inversions. We're in root position. Now you can write the Roman numeral plus the inversion over again, but since you wrote the Roman numeral over here in measure 2, I usually just write the change of inversion. So I would just write 7 like that to say that the 5 is still active and it's just changed inversion. Okay, next in measure 4, I see do in the bass, and I've been expecting a 1 chord, right? So here I'm anticipating that this is going to be where my 1 comes in. Again, 1 is C, E, G. I'm seeing a C, G. Here's a D that doesn't belong to the chord. A bunch of C, an E here, so it's looking like a 1 chord. That looks pretty good. This D approached by static note, left by step down, so another suspension happening here. So there's how to analyze that first line. Now I can continue on to the second line here. I see do, or scale degree 1, in the bass here. That goes for quite a while, right? 2 measures this time. And then it goes actually into this third measure here. And then it moves up to mi over here just before I get to my 2/6 chord. So chances are then at the beginning of the second line here, this is continuing the 1 chord, right? So I can rewrite 1 here since I'm on a new line. And I see some notes that don't belong. For example, I see an F here that eventually resolves down to an E. I see a D and I see a B here, okay? And so I guess the question is, can we take care of these as embellishing tones? So this F here, we can consider it as though it's coming from this G, except this G is down an octave, right? If the G were up here, it would be easier to see as a passing tone, okay? And then this D, it's coming from the E, and it's eventually, so we've got an E here, we've got a D here, and then a B here, followed by this C that's a chord tone. So this is actually 2 embellishing tones in a row. We've got the D acting as a passing tone, E, D, C, and we've got this B as a leap from the last chord tone. So this is a kind of appoggiatura. Coming from the E. Another way, though, that we could understand it is as though there are 2 lines. You see how there's an E happening here? So we could take that as the upper voice line. And then you see how there's a C happening over here. We could take that as a lower voice line connecting to the B, and both connect to the C. So the D could be a passing tone from this E, and the B could be a neighbor tone from the previous C. That's another way to think about it, and probably a better way than the appoggiatura explanation that I just gave. I think I like that way a little bit better, but I would accept either one as possibilities. Okay, so that measure a little more complex for embellishing tones. Going into the next measure here, we've got kind of a repetition happening, right, of the melody. You see this E, D, C line again. You see the C, B, C line again happening. So that's why this 1 chord is kind of hanging out. We've got a kind of repetition happening. That 1 chord continues into measure 3 here. And then when we get the mi in the bass, I'm guessing it's going to be a change of inversion, right? Since we know that the 1 chord is do, mi, sol, or scale degree 1, scale degree 3, scale degree 5, right? Mi is scale degree 3. I'm guessing it's going to be a change of inversion. So I'll go ahead and write 1/6 here, and I'm going to just verify that. Is there C, E, G above it? Here's E, G. I see a C and a G over here. So yeah, indeed, we've just got a change of inversion. So there's the whole Roman numeral portion of the harmonic analysis. The last step then is to do your phrase model analysis to show how the phrase model is active here. And the way to do that is to go to the end of the phrase first. You get one set of the labels TB for tonic beginning, predominant PD, D for dominant, and TE for tonic ending. For every phrase you analyze, you get one set of these labels. So that means once I write TB, I can't write TB again later on in the same phrase, right? Because I've already used up my TB. Similarly, once I write PD, I can't use PD again within my phrase, right? So in other words, you don't want to label every single harmony with one of these. You want to label just the important representative from each category, okay? So the way to do this is to start at the end, just like we did with our Roman numeral analysis. So I want to find the tonic that ends the phrase. And of course, if we had a half cadence, we wouldn't have a tonic that ends the phrase, but here, since we've got a PAC, there's our tonic ending, okay? Then I want to back up and find the cadential dominant. That's what that D is going to go on. Where's the cadential dominant? Okay, so there's the D labeling the cadential 6/4, that's the cadential dominant. And then I want to back up and find where my predominant is. And here there's only one place, right? Now let's say that we had a 4 chord come before this 2/6. So we had something like 4, 2, 6, 5, 1. The PD label would go on that 4. It goes on the first strong predominant that comes immediately before the cadence. So in this case down here, the 4 would be our first strong predominant, if that's what we had, but we don't here. We just have the 2/6. Okay, so there's where my PD label goes. After you've done that, you want to go to the beginning and label the first tonic that comes in. Tonic beginning. And that just shows you how the phrase model is dispersed across this phrase. And this is actually a very common way to lay out the phrase model. You've got lots of prolongation of tonic, right? In fact, the majority of the phrase is taken up by prolongation of tonic. And then very quickly at the cadence, you've got predominant, dominant, tonic ending. And that is very common. The majority of phrases in Western classical music are laid out this way. So that's performing a harmonic analysis.